Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webcast, The Gap Between Logistics and Technology, How to Bridge It and Stay Connected. It's presented by the Journal of Commerce, part of the Maritime and Trade Division of IHS Markit. On behalf of the JOC, I'd like to thank Redwood Logistics for sponsoring today's program. I'm Alessandra Barrett, Senior Content Editor for the JOC within IHS Markit, and I'll be your moderator. Joining me today is Michael Johnson, Executive Vice President of Strategy at Redwood Logistics. Now, before we begin, I have just a few quick housekeeping notes. Everything you need to navigate the webcast can be found at the bottom of the console by the widgets listed. Click any of these to find directions for submitting questions, speaker bios, and much more. For the presentation slides, please reach out to Redwood Logistics directly at hello@redwoodlogistics.com, and that will appear at on the closing slide as well. So one thing I want to point out is that we will be having a Q&A at the end of this presentation, so please submit your questions for our speakers at any time throughout the conversation so we can build that into the second part of our event. Just type your question into the Ask a Question area and then click the Submit button. MJ, the floor is yours.
Allie, thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for joining me today. My name is Michael Johnson, or MJ, as a lot of my friends and colleagues call me, and I'm excited to be here today to discuss the extremely relevant topic of bridging the gap between logistics and technology, or really put another way, promoting connectedness in the supply chain and moving towards a world with more open networks for higher levels of collaboration between organizations and more value creation for the supply chain. Just for a quick introduction to everyone joining today, my career in supply chain started in 2007 at Strive Logistics, where I had the opportunity to work across every function of the brokerage. I spent the next 11 years at Strive Logistics leading our strategy, operations, and technology teams before Strive Logistics was acquired by Redwood in early 2019. And so in my current role as the EVP of Strategy at Redwood, I get to spend a lot of my time interfacing between our operations, our business, our strategy, and our engineering teams, working through problem solving and working through how we advance our strategic and technology initiatives with a strong focus on growing our digital freight brokerage as well. We're going to cover the following topics today, starting with a look at the fragmentation that exists in the supply chain across both freight and technology. Then we'll move on to some of the lessons learned from 2020. Specifically, how has the last 15 months accelerated the need and demand for more connected technology solutions? I'll then share a market update and forecast for 2021, including some strategies that we're seeing shippers and carriers embrace to navigate market and network uncertainties. And then finally, we'll talk about what's required to solve the freight technology disconnect, and what are some of the new digital freight tech offerings that companies can embrace today to elevate their operations. Before I go on to the next slide, I wanted to share a stat I read pretty recently by Gartner, which said 68% of companies are investing in digital supply chain planning, and it's their highest priority for digital investment. I think what that showcases is that we're all in the very early innings of a massive amount of innovation for the supply chain. Between cloud-based solutions, APIs, data science, automation, and many other technologies that are just starting to mature into the supply chain space, I'm extremely excited about what the next phase of transformation for our industry looks like and the opportunities it will unlock for all of us. I think trends in remote work over the last year and the technology that has connected us will only accelerate how our ideas are shared and operationalized. So when we talk about freight and technology fragmentation, I think it's first important to take a look at how we got here. If we look at the evolution of logistics over the past 40 plus years, we can see a pretty clear picture of how fragmentation emerged in the transportation industry. And really what started it was deregulation back in 1980. And what's interesting about deregulation is it really prompted the acceleration of fragmentation across the carrier community. Between 1980, when deregulation occurred, and the early 1990s, over 1 million new carriers entered the market. So it shows that there was a tremendous amount of growth on the carrier segment. And then again, fast forward to when C.H. Robinson acquired American Backhaulers, and a new wave of upstart 3PLs were born around 2000. Many in the Chicago area, but many of the leading 3PLs found their roots around that time as well. If you rewind to that period of time, there were only a handful of technology solutions available to carriers, 3PLs, and shippers. Fast forward to 2010, and new cloud-based technology and lower development cost really started to pave the way for the proliferation of new lightweight technology solutions meant to solve specific problems for the supply chain. Over the past 10 years, we've seen an explosion of new technology and investment for our industry, to the point that the solutions are starting to become the problem. I believe the next evolution of this cycle, and what we'll see over the next 10 years, is connecting all of these disparate systems so that business can have end-to-end interoperability across their tech providers. Harmonizing both data and technology is going to take center stage as the area where organizations can unlock the most value for their business. But where are we now? So we just covered that the number of choices is more abundant, and this will continue to grow. And as the number of tech solutions grows, so too will the number of disparate systems we're all using. Compounding this issue will be custom operational work streams that businesses are introducing to streamline their operations. Pulling together this solution will be difficult. We are staring at the intersection of fragmentation now across shippers, carriers, 3PLs, and technology providers. And it seems to be a trend that's only accelerating. So we need to bridge the gap. We need to unify planning, technology, visibility, and partner collaboration, and move towards more open network planning and real-time data sharing and execution models. The reality is, variability is the new normal. Complexity of goods, lack of standardization, and volatility in supply and demand networks are exacerbating the problems we need to solve. Variability in our industry is one of the key reasons it's yet to be disrupted. It's hard to Uberize the industry because you can't induce supply to meet demand the same way you can for passenger transportation. The fact that most freight travels hundreds of miles is a lot different than passenger transportation. And then there's also the CDL, which is a lot different than someone with a driver's license signing up on an app to haul passengers or restaurant deliveries at a local level. The intricacy of shipping networks and their variable nature means that the status quo of one-dimensional planning is not going to unlock future value for the supply chain. Collaboration across shipping networks and aggregating capacity network insights is going to be critical to moving us past the 50% carrier utilization mark. Moving us towards higher and more efficient utilization across our carrier networks is also going to help us try solve the driver shortage that we're all faced with. And finally, consumer demands are changing faster than ever before. E-commerce, for example, in 2020 grew to $792 billion, which is a 100% increase from the level we were at just 5 years ago. As growth in e-commerce continues to soar, consumers are also becoming more impatient. And supply chains are now global. Platforms like Amazon, Alibaba, and eBay have opened up commerce across countries. The supply chains that thrive over the next decade will employ digital strategies. They'll collaborate with more partners. and they'll leverage data and analytics. They'll operate flexible supply chain platforms so that they can respond to these changes in consumption, supply and demand volatility, and other unexpected supply chain shocks. And so what can we learn from 2020, and what did the last 15 months teach us? Well, first, the problems of the past are still present. The sharp spikes in volatility we observed that disrupted supply chain networks was unlike anything we've ever seen before. Routing guides failed, and as we'll see in a few slides, tender rejections in the market reached levels never before seen. 2020 accelerated the need for technology. At Redwood, we're getting more interest from shippers in products like our real-time pricing API so that they can quickly and confidently navigate the ebbs and flows in their network and also streamline their operations in the process. Access to real-time data and spend insights has transformed the decades-long process of contracted capacity. Supply chain leaders are now able to rethink their supply chain strategy to control costs, ensure routing guide compliance, and establish more mutually beneficial relationships with their carrier base. I firmly believe that new innovation and technology is going to enable more flexible carrier-shipper contracts in the future. I expect that the popularity of more frequent pricing events, which we're seeing this year, is going to continue to grow. And eventually, carrier-shipper 3PL contracts will evolve into dynamic rate execution. Contracted rates in the future are going to be anchored to market demand events with dynamic adjustments that go up or down based on mutually agreed upon market indicators. By moving in this direction, we'll encourage more routing guide compliance, especially during periods of volatility. We'll also strengthen relationships between shippers, carriers, and logistics companies. Pushing that supply chain towards more durable and flexible contracts is going to be a net positive, and ultimately it's going to help us move in the direction of higher and longer term network and fleet utilization. So this slide is pretty powerful, and the dramatic shift we saw in demand is pretty easy to recognize. If you look back to April and May last year, you can kind of see the spike that happened in March and early April as consumers loaded up on things like home products and food and beverage and the essentials to stay remote and to stay at home. After that, the shutdowns caused a massive decline in demand in the market. And the cost per shipment dropped so dramatically that for several weeks it was below the operating break-even point for carriers. Consequently, this drove so many carriers off the road that shutdowns halted shipping across the country. If you fast forward 2 months, as states began to reopen, we saw the steepest rise in rates as the supply of trucks couldn't keep up with demand from shippers. And what made this situation even worse was that structural routing guides had been fractured, which left both shippers and carriers operating at elevated levels in the spot market they weren't used to. Additional long-term consequences from the pandemic that we're experiencing now and will experience into the future were the number of drivers that left the industry due to fear of caution, due to not contracting illness. There were other long-term consequences, such as driver schools getting shut down for months, which hampered our recruiting efforts for new drivers into our industry. Another view of tender rejections in the market shows exactly how dislocated carrier and shipper networks are at the present. Again, if you tie back and you look back at April and May, you can see that routing guide compliance was not an issue. there was not a lot of freight moving, and carriers were hauling as much freight as they could. Fast forward into July and August, and the structural dislocations became apparent through routing guides. I think what is unique about how long tender rejections have remained at historically elevated levels is the duration. Typically in our 3-year cyclical supply and demand cycle, these sorts of issues generally lead to contracted rates improving, which leads to less freight in the spot market. And what shippers and carriers are dealing with now is long-term dislocated networks that they need to rebuild. In addition, strong consumer demand is pushing the demand side up, coupled with a driver shortage and these transportation networks that need to be reset and rebid. Overall, 2020 showed us that being disconnected is the Achilles heel. It's costing organizations time and money. And the biggest innovation through 2020 has been connecting with each other, problem solving over tools like Zoom, Teams, WebEx. Most businesses were able to quickly streamline how we operate in a remote environment using technology. The next part of this cycle is now connecting our systems with each other to streamline how our technology can operate. Looking ahead to 2021, and based on the lessons we learned in 2020, here are the 5 themes and goals that we're hearing from our shipper and carrier partners that are a focus for them this year. First and foremost, ROI. What technology strategies will deliver the biggest short and long-term ROI for their business and keep their business models competitive? Second, automation. What workflows can be optimized using technology so that employees can focus on relationships and higher level problem solving? 3, flexibility. Supply chain execution strategies need to be flexible to market impacts and for demand planning. And this has never been more apparent than over the past 12 months. 4, visibility. Not just visibility to trucks and to network, but visibility to data. It's estimated that 73% of all data goes unused by organizations for analytics. Capturing the data is step 1, but then doing something with the data will be step 2. And finally, people. People are the foundation for any successful company, and they're the organization's biggest asset. Organizations that want to stay competitive are going to invest in technology, and they're going to enable and empower their employees with that same technology.
So, MJ, what are you seeing organizations looking for when it comes to digital freight technology to really combat the increased market volatility?
Sure. That's a good question. What we're hearing from shippers and from carriers alike is everyone is looking for demand planning tools and better analytics that can help with network optimization. And we hear about, the rating API product I mentioned. That's meant to provide dynamic capacity and also real-time pricing, but really a flexible source of capacity for shippers. So I think, like in summary, both parties, everyone in the supply chain right now is looking for ways to employ technology that can help with the end-to-end execution of their business, and digital freight technology that can tie together each part of the process from start to finish. So that means from quote to tender to carrier selection, visibility, and then invoicing. And there's different models out there, but most people, I think, are also looking for technology that's anchored to relationship-centric operations teams. And those operations teams should have a high focus and priority in doing what's best for the carrier or the shipper. and work on problem resolution and exception management rather than, some of the tasks that technology can take over for today. And so with that, we'll now take a look at transformation investment strategies for 2021. First, though, what has the market told us so far this year, and what is driving companies towards digitalization? Well, I think, now that we're 4 months into 2021, we can confirm the economy is in the midst of a V-shaped recovery, and likely will finish ahead of the pre-crisis trajectory we observed before the pandemic. So what that means is a boost in GDP ahead of expectations before the crisis started. Some of the factors driving this are historically low inventories, more regional shipping trends to keep up with next day and same day consumer expectations. And I think also trends in deurbanization and remote work are driving different types of consumption. We're seeing more consumption from big box and retail stores as in-home dining becomes more prevalent and as more people move away from cities into the suburbs. Anecdotally, a new poll run by Wells and Fargo showed that 37% of millennials were committed to leaving the cities they were in within the year. And then finally, there are trillions of dollars of government stimulus flowing right back into the economy right now. And much of that is in consumption of goods and materials today rather than service-based items. So it's all creating this perfect storm of extremely high demand in the market. So here's a summary of some of the strategies we're seeing our customer and carrier partners deploy in 2021. First, every strategy today is data-led. So companies are eager to use their own data to make better decisions and deliver better outcomes. We're also seeing more of the industry looking to digitize the carrier and the customer experience, whether that's through digital freight brokerage technology, visibility tools, or other methods. And I think driving system connectedness within and across organizations is going to be paramount to the future success of the supply chain. Imagine a world where all of our systems have the same interoperability as the Microsoft product suite. We're also seeing IT leaders make a significant investment in the digital maturity of their core operating systems. They're modernizing their tech stack for future success. And then lastly, but certainly not least, organizations have long known about the benefit of advancing their analytics capabilities. But to date in the maturity cycle, I put the industry somewhere between descriptive and predictive on where we are. And companies first need to harness their own data to unlock value, but the real win and the exponential value we'll see across the supply chain is going to happen when both predictive and prescriptive analytics can provide recommendations based on data across multiple networks and not siloed to one organization. When we unlock that value, it will provide the most significant lift in network operational and driver utilization this industry's ever seen. How do we solve the freight tech disconnect? This is a good representation of what connectivity in supply chain looks like today. And solving this challenge in a highly fragmented industry produces solutions that are as fragmented as the market itself. And so really what we're missing is that binding agent that can bring these disparate solutions together with technical prowess and vertical expertise and process excellence. Some of the major areas these new solutions are coming in to solve include our manual processes, limited visibility and communication, static pricing, and less capacity.
So just jumping in for a sec, many would say that this fragmented way of connecting cloud technology, it's fallen short of delivering like an easy button to logistics. So what approaches, what can organizations do to begin really unlocking more ROI from their transformation investments? What approaches would you recommend to address this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's actually, the base case for where a lot of our investment at Redwood is happening right now, which is, Redwood recognizes this problem of the fragmented connectivity, and we're actively investing in solving this problem, not only for Redwood, but for all members of the supply chain. So just jumping ahead, I think this slide helps illustrate the solution we're trying to bring to the market to unlock more of that value for every constituent in the supply chain. And really what this is and what the Redwood Connect product is about is a one-to-many integration layer that we're building for the supply chain community so that businesses and organizations can quickly integrate and connect to thousands of additional trading partners. The Redwood Connect framework really allows tech teams to repurpose their integration work and at a much lower cost. And so to date, Redwood has partnered and integrated to some of the largest tier 1 TMS providers in the country. But really the power of Connect is about the broader ecosystem. It's about connecting the warehouse management systems, the order management systems, ERP systems, Gartner rated tracking platforms, and more. So at Redwood, I think our vision is really grounded to how do we facilitate connectivity to all systems within the supply chain and beyond, and then enable value creation for all parties that are leveraging this data and the process automation opportunities that exist across the entire ecosystem. I think specifically, within the brokerage, some of the areas Redwood multimodal is leveraging the Redwood Connect platform include how we're delivering instant quoting and booking functionality, how we're automating freight workflows, our dynamic procurement execution, and also our freight matching, all of which are saving carrier and shipper partners time and money. So we just covered some of the Redwood approach, but we'll use the next few slides to go a little deeper. So to start, this is a fantastic total addressable market forecast that was put out there for the trucking, brokerage, and digital freight brokerage markets over the next 8 years. And I like this illustration because I think the big takeaway is that the projected growth of the digital freight brokerage market is expected to grow from roughly $8 or $9 billion this year to $89 billion by 2028. And so, to me, this serves as excellent validation of the role technology will play, not only in the brokerage realm, but across our entire industry. And so if digital freight brokerage is expected to be a $90 million revenue segment, you can imagine the size of the technology market share across all of our supply chain services that will exist and that we're going to be part of over the next 7 years. So the Redwood approach to building the bridge between logistics and technology really rests on 3 of our core strengths. First, we are an open provider to the market. So Redwood is the only logistics provider right now who's open from both a logistics and a technology point of view, and this makes us extremely unique. I think our logistics experience also sets us apart from our peers. Redwood is an expert across the board between modes, services, and physical and digital network design. We also practice what we preach, and we're customers of our own product. And so we're the only supply chain company now, not only with our logistics side, but with a massive consulting side as well. And then finally, the way we've built our platform is to deliver optionality. So subscribers can either leverage our platform or they can only use systems that are leveraging the platform. And in either case, we'll deliver the right solution for them. A few examples of digital solutions powered by our Redwood Connect platform include our TMS platform connectivity. Our solution is agnostic as we connect new TMS systems to the existing ecosystem of connectivity. And we're doing this to deliver upstream value on the integration time and materials, as well as downstream value through plug-and-play connectivity and process automation. Our API connectivity is delivering value to customers through both tracking and rating visibility. Providing real-time rates and guaranteed capacity used to only exist for the LTL industry. And over the next few years, we believe it will become the status quo for all modes. Dynamic routing and pricing. Redwood is using matching, pricing, and ranking algorithms to operationalize our own private network of capacity with over 100,000 trucks to better serve our customers. And we're leveraging our scale and our own carrier insights to do that instead of more commoditized marketplace capacity. And then finally, capacity as a service. This is a newer concept, but it will allow us to repurpose and commercialize our digital freight brokerage model and service and provide it as a service to shippers, something we're extremely excited about. So platform connectivity, we've covered some of this in detail, but the platform connectivity powered by Redwood Connect is really the binding agent to bring all of the technology and network disparity together. I think the illustration on this slide is a good view of what we're trying to accomplish, but a better visual would be if this was more three-dimensional. Essentially, what we're trying to build is a platform that can power a network of networks across the supply chain and that anybody can subscribe to for connectivity. API connectivity. We believe in plug-and-play access to the largest tracking providers in the market, and we're connected to all of them. In fact, just recently, we struck a partnership with one of the highest-rated Gartner tracking providers in the market. And this will soon be an announcement that we'll be sharing with the market. Rating, which we've already discussed in some detail, helps streamline the operational process for both our shipper partners and for Redwood, ultimately saving time and money for everyone. And finally, capacity. Our goal will be to continue building a private marketplace of capacity that we can offer our shippers. When selecting a digital freight brokerage, it's important to understand their capacity strategy and scale. I think, especially today, digital freight brokerage could mean a lot of different things, and it's important for shippers to fully understand how capacity is found and then utilized. Subscribing to public marketplaces of capacity that anyone can access is not a competitive advantage for a digital freight brokerage, and a question shippers should be asking in the market. And then delivering value. I won't run through each of these case studies, but at the highest level, these are examples of material time and cost savings that our customers are realizing by leveraging our Connect platform. Our teams transform supply chains across all verticals, and every solution is unique to the shipper we're working with. And it's delivered by logistics engineers and integrators. The majority of our clients use a combination of traditional and digital services with Redwood, but all of them are leveraging Connect to execute. And so just to summarize, we've talked about a few themes here, but first and foremost, organizations are frustrated with their transformation investments and their associated ROI. Technology solutions are abundant and proliferating rapidly, but they have failed to deliver an easy button to the industry. Because of system and technology disparity, technology models are complex and they're becoming more expensive to support. And like we discussed, connectivity is the problem, but it's also the solution. And so Redwood is deeply invested in our open network platform approach for supply chain and advancing an ecosystem of connectivity for all members to share and transfer their data. And so with that, I'll open it up, Allie, for questions.
Great, thanks a lot. Really great presentation. A reminder to everyone to submit your questions. We've got a little bit of time here so we can work through as many as we are able. A reminder to just type your question into the Ask a Question area and then click Submit. So let's see. Meantime, we'll get started. In your opinion, have businesses been able to leverage their technology investments to the best of their ability in attempts to adopt a more digitally forward approach to logistics? What are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of companies are placing a lot of focus on how they can leverage, a more digitally forward approach to logistics. I think a lot of companies are also, especially, many of the companies, and some of these are very large companies, as well as large carriers that we talk to, they either lack the technical expertise or they're operating more archaic operating systems that are preventing them from some of the gains they could receive from technology and automation. So I'd say the answer is mixed depending on who you talk to. But I'd also say you'd be surprised at the number of very large organizations that are still on archaic frameworks like AS400 and some of the others that are preventing them from really realizing some of the gains that could be achieved by moving to a more modern, open architecture.
Sure. Okay, here's an interesting one. I see what Redwood wants to do with streamlining all the different apps. Redwood becomes a middleman who consolidates the data to the customer. What our team is running into now is that when something breaks, there's the blame between the source of the data and the middleman. How will Redwood take ownership of the process? For example, when something breaks, we want a single point of contact to correct the issue, not a redirection to another system.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question and something that is top of mind as we become sort of that platform for connectivity. So it's something we have dedicated teams now on site to support. And I would expect that through the larger commercialization of our product, we're going to continue to monitor the data transfer and the viability of our network connections. So certainly something we would assign dedicated support staff to help work through as we continue to add additional partners to our network.
This is more of a wide angle question. How does a lack of connectivity between shipper systems, apps, and partners impact their business as a whole? I guess looking to really just get your thoughts on that bigger issue.
I think it presents a lot of lost opportunity. The lack of connectivity is exposing a loss of productivity. And so, productivity goes down when supply chain operators have to switch from one system to another in order to manage transportation from end to end. And so in those scenarios, what we've observed is there's just a lot of manual touch points involved in the process that could be streamlined with system connectivity and with technology. The last piece, which is likely under-realized, is that the data between systems is likely not congruent. So it has to be mapped and normalized in a database like Snowflake to derive any sort of value or meaning. And if you look at the rise in popularity of Snowflake, you can see, I think, how widely accepted it is that there are lots of different incongruent systems. There's lots of system disparity. There's lots of data that's not normalized. And right now, again, as I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, Snowflake is becoming that one source of the truth so that we can first see a descriptive breakdown of all of our data. And then operationalizing it, I think, is the next step, but that's more about, that is more about process and system design and connectivity than just data aggregation. So they're quite different.
Okay. Your vision of becoming the glue for supply chains is excellent, and certainly what has been lacking. Who are your main competitors right now? Is it Convoy and Uber Freight, or solutions such as Chain.io, or both?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say we don't view any of those companies you mentioned as competitors. In fact, we would view them as partners and potential customers on our network. Our long-term vision is to be agnostic of anyone who wants to be part of the platform and not exclude anyone. It really is about driving more scale into the ecosystem of connectivity so that everyone can unlock the value from it. And so, from where we are from a growth perspective, I think we've just started to get the flywheel turning. But as we continue to add partners to our Redwood Connect network, I think the network effect becomes larger and the value it unlocks for all parties grows with it.
How have Redwood shippers and carriers been able to benefit from an all-inclusive digital logistics platform?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, especially within our brokerage, our brokerage leverages our Redwood Connect platform to deliver the digital logistics experience. So for shippers, we want to provide real-time and full transparency for everything from quote to invoice and everything in between. And so I think getting the information to shippers quickly and into the operatings they're using reduces friction. A good example of that is how we're embedding our rating API solution with Redwood Connect directly into the Tier 1 TMS system our shippers are using, so it becomes a natural part of their existing operations. And then, on the carrier side, we're really we're in phase 2, I would say, of building our digital fleet. Right now, we have 4,000 carriers, part of our digital carrier membership, and that comprises close to 150,000 tractors. Our goal is to triple that tractor count by the end of the year. So as we, again, are able to subscribe and bring in more partners to our ecosystem, I think that will only unlock value for each party, shipper or carrier in our network, because of the network effect.
Okay. I just want to remind people to submit questions, and at this point we have a few minutes left. Don't worry about that. Maybe that question's already in the system. Someone else has asked it. If they come in and they're similar, we just are kind of combining them and it makes for a more robust question. So don't worry if you think that your idea is one that someone else is asking about. So let me jump back in. Carriers are one of the biggest technology deficient sources that have few online resources, booking, tracking payments, etc. However, they're starting to appear in the market, and we are starting to see those entities move to a more digital world. What does your model do to help push those other supply chain entities, primarily ocean and air carriers? What incentives are being pushed out to help get more partners on board?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say, at this time, we have a really carrier-centric approach to building up our digital freight brokerage scale based on the client footprint we have and the opportunities we believe we can provide to both our carrier and our shipper partners. I think it's a great call out, which is there's an abundance of new digital technology available to allow small and medium-sized carriers to execute digitally. Our goal, first and foremost, will always to be carrier-centric, though. And so as we build out our existing digital freight brokerage strategy and the connectivity we have, we will certainly continue to add on channel partners, I'll call them, so that we can distribute relevant load visibility to the right carriers that we have relationships with. But I think the limitation for some of the new technology coming out there is we don't want to ever feel like our transportation strategy is a commodity on behalf of the shipper. We want to retain our competitive advantage, build our relationships and the value we can provide to long-term carrier partners, and try to operationalize that data rather than work through transactional opportunities that may exist through new apps or load board marketplaces.
Great. With so many systems, what is a recommended approach when systems meet with incompatibility?
I guess it would depend on what the use case is. It's a tough question to answer without an example, but I think having an integration layer can help transform data so that it can be congruent with other systems, but it does really require that solution like a Redwood Connect to do the transformations so that data is normalized and it can be operationalized between one system and another. It's really about how do we create that universal translator so that we don't have those problems between systems working with one another.
I love seeing the follow-up questions here. It really, everyone's jumping in a nice way, that it's a nice dialogue. So definitely ask questions on what other people have asked questions about, and we will make sure that MJ clarifies and we get all of his information out today. What role do you see IoT devices playing in a digitized 3PL world?
It'll be huge. I'm struggling to find the words, but when you introduce that as sort of the fourth dimension to the topics we discussed today, I think system interoperability combined with interoperability between, robotics and IoT devices is going to be transformational. And I think in a net positive way for everyone here, because we will be able to automate and streamline not just process between technology and systems, but also in the physical world as well. And so IoT devices are going to have a outsized impact on our industry, especially when it comes to e-commerce and understanding trends and having data feedback come in real time. I think it's going to present a really exciting opportunity, and I think there's going to be a proliferation of IoT devices. I think that will emerge as strongly, if not in a bigger way than we've seen over the past 10 years with new tech solutions built for the supply chain.
Could you spend just a minute or two more on that? What applications are you most excited about? Where do you really see potential that will drive innovation on your side?
Sure. I think, one of the exciting new technologies when it comes to inventory management is going to be computer vision, and how we can use technology to gain accurate and real-time insights across what inventory levels look like across businesses. And then again, I think collaboration between shippers and between retailers is going to take center stage as well, so that if you order an item that from a particular retailer that is 2 days away, but they have an affiliate partner in their network and they have visibility into that inventory and it's 1 hour away, we'll see a lot more collaboration and partnerships, I think, in that regard, in terms of how commerce is done. And so again, I think it'll be a net positive for everybody. But that's just one application. I think there's applications in the warehouse that will be fantastic. I think some of the new devices we see in tractors to help prevent drivers from falling asleep using things like computer vision are really exciting, because it just helps our industry become safer, more efficient, and that's what we're all striving for. And
now, when someone comes to you, when a potential customer comes to you and says, look, I fully believe that we need to move in this direction, but I'm getting resistance, what is the leading, if you have to just give them one bullet point of how to convince, what is that?
Yeah, I think, again, it depends on the specific shipper and what they're striving for. I think if you look at so many of our solutions that are part of the Redwood Connect platform, it's free to shippers to integrate. So whether it's our rating API or a tracking solution, there's no upfront cost to do the implementation or the integration. And because we already have most of the TMS, the big TMS systems on our platform, we're able to spin the connectivity up in a matter of hours. I think if it's a smaller shipper or a different mode, it would kind of depend on the case. But ultimately, what we would try to do is present a business case and project an ROI, and then work from there, and basically give our points of contact the use case and the ROI associated that they can then use to convince some of the other business partners they're working with.
Great. Well, we are conscious of everyone's time and how many meetings and webcasts people have, so we had agreed to end this a couple minutes early. I will say that any unanswered questions, if we felt that there was some overlap there, if your question wasn't answered, it will be answered in email directly. So I want to thank MJ. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. The webcast will be available on demand within 24 to 48 hours, and you'll receive an email reminder about that. Also, for more information related to today's webcast, including where you can leave us your evaluation, please visit the resource link on the webcast console. Again, thanks for attending today's webcast, The Gap Between Logistics and Technology, How to Bridge It and Stay Connected, presented by the Journal of Commerce, part of the Maritime and Trade Division of IHS Markit. On behalf of the JOC, I'd like to thank Redwood Logistics for sponsoring today's program, and many thanks to Michael for an outstanding presentation and a great discussion. I'm Alessandra Barrett. Have a great day.
Thank you, Allie.